Okay, folks, we are back. And if you watched my thrift shop haul with all the Garfield books that I got from my buddy Jose, you saw in the beginning of the video I talked about a couple of VHS that I had picked up. Particularly the movie that stood out to me purely for polarizing ratings was this movie. It's a 1990 film directed by Joe Roth called Coupe de Ville. Now, Joe has a lot of producerships in his IMDb. He directed a few films. One of my wife's favorite holiday movies, Christmas with the Cranks, starring Jamie Lee Curtis and Tim Allen. He directed that picture, and it is an enjoyable movie. And the reason specifically, like I was mentioning, this is a, by the way, MCA Universal release, like I mentioned, 1990. It had very polarizing reviews. So Rotten Tomatoes gives this particular film 25%, but then Google users are 94%, and IMDb is kind of middle of the road at 6.7 out of 10. So I was intrigued, and I figured I got to see for myself why there is a vast gulf between the professional movie reviewers and us regular folks. By the way, Rotten Tomatoes audience score was around 72%. So this falls into the comedy genre category, and I feel like the movies that did not do, there's not a lot of information. The Wikipedia page, sometimes I'll go to research a movie on Wikipedia and there is so much information. This has such a short list. By the way, it's rated PG-13 and it has a runtime of 1 hour and 38 minutes. So we're going to fill this review because there wasn't a lot of information. We're going to read the back of the box. Starring Patrick Dempsey, Ari Gross, and Daniel Stern. A heartwarming comedy about three very different brothers who reluctantly unite for a 1,500-mile car trip from Detroit to Miami Beach, Florida, at the request of their domineering father, played by Alan Arkin, who I thought was great in the role. The trio finds themselves driving a classic 1954 powder blue Cadillac Coupe de Ville to surprise their mother in Miami on her 90th birthday. The race is on to see if the bickering brothers can get there on time without damaging the car. Or each other. And then it says, exceptional performances blend with a lively soundtrack and this memorable and lighthearted journey. And the uncle is played by Joseph Bologna? Bologna? I don't know. It's Italian, all right? So anyway, you will notice there was no critics. Like a lot of the times, they'll be like New York Times best whatever of the year. First big mistake. This is one interesting thing. This is not a Coupe de Ville. A Coupe de Ville is considered a hardtop Cadillac, not a convertible. And in 1954, this was considered a Series 62 Cadillac convertible, which doesn't really have the same ring for a movie title. Can you imagine if this movie was called Series 62? Sounds like a sci-fi movie. So whatever, they went with Coupe de Ville, even though accurately, historically, it is not correct. It is, in fact, a Series 62 convertible. And they spent around $4,000 scouring thrift shops for period-correct clothing and interior decoration for the period correctness of the movie. The movie first starts out in 1952 in Detroit, and the brothers are squabbling as younger versions of themselves and fighting in their childhood bedroom, three crammed in one room like rats in a cage. And it kind of sets the precedent that oldest, younger, and middle all do not really get along and are all very different. And the oldest brother, who's played by Daniel Stern, I believe his character's name was Marvin, he was like, I can't wait to get out of here. And he's like ready to graduate high school. And then it fast forwards from 1952 or 53 when it first started. It jumps to 1963, the summer of 63, before the Kennedy assassination, before America lost its purity. So we see the Daniel Stern character, who's a sergeant in the Air Force, go to pick up this Cadillac that as we find out, the dad had bought the mom a new Cadillac, the same exact color and model in 1954, and they only had it for a short time. We don't really know the story. The dad kind of seems like he's an inventor trying to leave a legacy financially for his kids. And what the dad didn't tell the son, the oldest, that he's going to pick up this car, that the other two brothers are going to be coming along for the road trip with him. And the Patrick Dempsey one is kind of the greaser rebel, and then the one brother played by Ari Gross, he is kind of the nerdy book architectural type. I couldn't really determine if they were supposed to be Jewish or Italian. Is that weird that I even thought that? I don't know. And I like this film. It reminded me of, and also another movie that Daniel Stern, I like seeing him in the serious role. It reminded me of a Barry Levinson film called Diner, which takes place, it's another period movie from the late 50s, 60s. That movie takes place in Baltimore. But basically, this movie bombed. It only made $66,000 opening weekend, $6 million worldwide overall. And I don't understand why. Roger Ebert said it was predictable, as movies like this are. And so everybody just trashed this movie. 25% critics ratings. And I disagree with them. I cried when I watched the movie at the end. It had a great 60s and 50s rock and roll and doo-wop compilation that I thoroughly enjoyed. And overall, I am 4.5 out of 5 on this movie. I want to feel good when I watch a movie. I was entertained. It felt very authentic for the time. It didn't feel like it was trying to fit into another time and place. You felt like you were taken back to that time and place. And again, I loved Daniel Stern as a serious actor. You mostly think of him as like one of the coaches in the movie Rookie of the Year, where he's kind of a screwball guy, or you think of him as, interestingly enough, he played Marvin in this movie, and I think his character in Home Alone 1 and 2 was also Marv. Whoa! And that movie came out right around the same time period as this. I don't have my copy handy. Comment down below if you know what year Home Alone 1 came out, because it was like right around the same time period. Overall, I liked it. I enjoyed it. I don't know why the critics hated this movie. It was just a feel-good movie of the summer, and I laughed and I cried. And if you have siblings, it's just kind of this picture of, even though you're all different and maybe you have squabbles, maybe you have fights, hopefully blood is thicker than water and you'll all come back together in unity. Maybe there's a hard time. It's good to have a sibling to lean on and someone that you had a childhood with and common experiences with, and just to see that camaraderie. I felt like this movie was kind of like a coming of age / sibling love / camaraderie picture, and I really enjoyed that. So that's my take on this movie, Coupe de Ville. I wouldn't go as far. I don't know. I'm not in the 90s. When I first yesterday, I was thinking maybe I would be in the 5 out of 5 range, but mid 4s. It's good, but it's not like a I mean, is it a classic? I don't know. I think it could be a classic, but it's not like a very polarizing movie. There's a lot of unnecessary profanity. It's certainly not a Hallmark movie, but PG-13. I feel like this could have been a PG movie and it would have been more a family movie. I feel like maybe that was a shortfall for this movie. They tried to make it a little too raunchy. I feel like they could have toned it down a little bit, and this could have been a family-friendly classic. And instead, it was kind of going like a more edgy John Hughes vibe, because I felt like it kind of was playing off. I felt like a John Hughes kind of a vibe. But anyway, that's a genre connection right there. Or I'm just looking the time period of the movie. John Hughes was kind of still at his peak. Some of his movies were kind of crude, like, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. It didn't need to be as edgy as it was. It could have been a family-friendly classic, but instead they went a little bit more edgy, and maybe that kind of pushed out a lot of audience members that otherwise could have gone and seen this film. So until next time, we'll see you then.